You made something once that no one will ever see. Maybe it was a journal. Maybe it was a drawing you finished and slid into a drawer. You poured real care into it, knowing full well no other eyes would ever land on it. And then you hid it away. Why would anyone do that? It feels like a small, private quirk, a quiet little human habit. But the real answer is far stranger and far older than you think. Because 30,000 years ago, your ancestors did the exact same thing, except they crawled a quarter of a mile underground in total darkness to do it. Picture it, a narrow crack in a cliff face, a passage so tight you have to turn your shoulders sideways and exhale to fit through. No light, no air moving, just cold stone pressing in on every side. And then it opens. You raise a flickering flame, and the wall in front of you explodes into life. Horses, lions, rhinos, bison mid-charge, drawn with a confidence that would not look out of place in a modern art school. Painted by a hand that has been dust for 30,000 years. This is Chauvet Cave in southern France. And the deeper you go, the more impossible it becomes to explain. Because here is the part almost no one tells you. The most spectacular paintings in caves like Chauvet, Lascaux, and El Castillo are not near the entrance. They are not where people lived. They are not where a crowd could gather to admire them. They are buried in the deepest, darkest, most inaccessible chambers the cave has to offer. Some of these panels can only be reached by crawling through tunnels barely wide enough for a body. Some sit behind passages that flood. Some are in pockets of the earth so remote that the artist would have needed to plan the journey, carry fuel for fire, and navigate by memory through pitch blackness just to arrive at a blank wall. And then, in that suffocating dark, they painted. For what audience? In a space no torch would ever casually pass through? For art that, by any normal logic, no one was ever meant to see? This is the riddle that has haunted archaeologists for over a century. And to understand it, you have to let go of almost everything you assume about why humans make pictures. Start with how old this really is. For a long time, people believed cave art began in Europe, maybe 30 or 40,000 years ago, as if some switch flipped on in the European mind. But in 2014, an archaeologist named Maxime Aubert took tiny mineral samples from cave paintings on the Indonesian island of Sulawesi. He measured the slow, radioactive decay locked inside the rock that had formed over the images. The results rewrote the timeline. One painting of a wild pig came back at over 45,000 years old. On the other side of the planet from France, in a completely separate human population, people were doing the exact same thing, crawling into caves, pressing pigment to stone, leaving images in places of deep shadow. This was not a local fashion. This was something human, something that surfaced independently again and again wherever our species went. So what were they actually drawing? Animals mostly, but not the animals you would expect. The bones found in these caves show that ancient people mainly ate reindeer and smaller game, yet they rarely painted their dinner. Instead, they painted the dangerous ones, the powerful ones, lions, mammoths, woolly rhinos, charging bulls, the creatures that could kill you. The creatures that stirred something in the chest, and alongside the animals, something even stranger. Signs. A researcher named Genevieve von Petzinger spent years doing something no one had done before. She cataloged the abstract marks scattered across hundreds of European caves. Not the animals, but the dos, the lines, the crosses, the strange geometric symbols painted beside them. What she found was astonishing. The same small set of signs, around 32 of them, appearing in cave after cave, across thousands of miles and thousands of years. The same handful of shapes repeated by people who could never have met, separated by more time than all of recorded history. That is not random doodling. That is the ghost of a shared idea. Then there are the hands. In cave after cave, you find them. Stencils, a human hand pressed flat against the rock, with pigment blown around it so that its outline is left behind forever. Thousands of years later, you can place your own palm against that print and find it fits. For a long time, everyone assumed those hands belonged to men, mighty hunters, marking their territory. But an archaeologist named Dean Snow measured the finger proportions of hundreds of these stencils, The ratio between the index and ring finger differs between male and female hands. And when he ran the numbers, the result overturned the old story. Most of the hands were female, women pressing their palms to the cold stone, deep underground, leaving the one part of themselves that says, "Beyond all doubt, I was here." So we have the pieces of the puzzle now. Deliberate journeys into total darkness, dangerous animals instead of food, a secret alphabet of repeated signs, human hands reaching out from the rock, all of it hidden where no audience could ever gather. What ties it together? This is where one researcher offered an answer so strange it took decades to be taken seriously. His name is David Lewis Williams, and his idea begins not with art, but with the human brain. When the brain is pushed into an altered state by exhaustion, by hunger, by rhythmic dancing, by sensory deprivation, it produces a very specific cascade of visions. In the first stage, people see geometric patterns, dots, grids, zigzags, the exact kinds of signs von Peitzinger found painted on the walls. As the state deepens, those patterns morph into animals and figures. And in the deepest stage, the boundary between the self and the vision dissolves completely. Now think about where these paintings are. A cave deep underground is one of the most powerful sensory deprivation environments on Earth. No light, no sound, no sense of up or down. Crawl far enough into the dark, alone with a flickering flame, and your own mind will begin to fill the silence. Lewis Williams argued that the cave wall was not a canvas. It was a membrane, a thin surface between this world and another. The artists were not decorating a gallery. They were reaching through the rock towards something they believed was on the other side. The darkness was not an obstacle they overcame to paint. The darkness was the entire point. Sit with how that reframes everything. These were not the world's first interior decorators. They were not showing off. They were doing something we would now call sacred. They went into the belly of the earth, into a place that felt like the threshold of another reality, and they left a mark to say that they had been there, that they had reached out, that they had touched the unseen. And here's the thread that connects them to you. Because you have done a version of this too. You have whispered something into an empty room, knowing no one could hear. You have written words in a diary you will never let another soul read. You have stood at the edge of the ocean or under a sky thick with stars and felt the overwhelming need to say, "I am here," even though there was no one to say it to. Why, maybe for the same reason they did, not to be seen by other people, but to mark the moment you brushed up against something larger than yourself, to leave proof that, for one instant, you reached out toward the vastness, and the vastness almost reached back. The ancient painters could not write their names. They had no books, no monuments, no way to record a single day of their lives. And so they pressed their hands to the rock in the deepest dark, in a place no audience would ever come, and they made something anyway. Not for an audience, for the act itself. We tend to think art is about being seen, about likes, about views, about an audience watching. But 45,000 years ago, in the cold and the silence and the total absence of any witness, the very first artists proved that the deepest reason to create has nothing to do with being seen at all. It has to do with reaching toward the dark, toward the unknown, toward whatever is on the other side of the wall. So the next time you make something no one will ever see, and you feel that strange pull to do it anyway, do not dismiss it as a quiet little quirk. It is one of the oldest things a human has ever done. You made something once that no one would ever see. And in that single secret act, you were standing in the deepest chamber of a cave that has been dark for 45,000 years, pressing your hand to the stone, reaching for the other side.